Today, I want to talk to you about escaping from sin while you can. And we're going to take a look at 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 2. We read this. Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. Now, this was not the only time of spiritual decline in the life of David, but this episode of adultery was the most notorious in the life of the king. This tragic scandal began many years before, as David lived year after year, adding wives until he had 4 or 5, without properly restraining the passions of his flesh. The years of unrestrained passions set the stage, but the moment of temptation described here in 2 Samuel chapter 11, that provided the opportunity. Our verse tells us that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof. The Hebrew verb form of walked suggests that David paced back and forth on the roof. He couldn't sleep, and he was uneasy because he wasn't where God wanted him to be. As he paced back and forth, he saw a woman bathing. Now, some people think that Bathsheba was being immodest and knew that she could be seen. Other people think that there was absolutely nothing inappropriate in what she did. Either way, any possible immodesty on Bathsheba's part in no way excused David's sin in any way. Nevertheless, David saw a woman bathing. Now, David's sin was not in seeing this woman. It's unlikely that he expected or planned to see her. No, David's sin was in choosing to keep his eyes on an alluring image after the sight came before his eyes. Christians, both men and women, must learn to never let their eyes or their mind rest on alluring images except for what belongs to them, so to speak, in marriage. Our eyes must bounce off of any impure yet alluring image that comes in our sight. Yet David didn't. He indulged himself a lustful look at the bathing beauty. This shows us that David's many wives did not satisfy his lust. And it wasn't because there was something lacking in all or some of those 4 or 5 women. It was because you can't satisfy lusts of the flesh, because they are primarily rebellious assertions of self. It wasn't so much that David wanted the bathing beauty, it was that he would not be satisfied with what God gave him. The life of David's son Solomon illustrates this principle in an exaggerated way. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. David and Solomon, in an even greater way, show us that if one woman isn't enough, then 1,000 women aren't enough. The problem isn't in the marriage partner you have. The problem is deep within you. Yet, our verse also tells us that the woman was very beautiful to behold. But the real strength of a temptation often does not lie in the nature of the tempting object, but it lies in the state of heart and mind of the one being tempted. Even so, this temptation was not too strong for David, no matter how beautiful the woman was. For example, Joseph was even more severely tempted to commit sexual immorality than David was here. But Joseph, as it's recorded in the book of Genesis, he fled that temptation. Through this entire tragedy, God gave David many avenues of escape. Now, the easier avenues come first. But as the temptation builds momentum, the ways of escape become more and more difficult. In this sense, temptation becomes something like a train. When it rolls slowly, it's easy to jump off. But as it builds up speed, it requires more courage to escape. Now, this should leave us with two thoughts. First, the time to escape temptation is at its early stage. Second, in regard to the temptation that you or I face right now, there will never be an easier time to say no than now. If you think no will be easier to say tomorrow to that temptation, you are mistaken, perhaps tragically so. Don't let that be you. Say no to those temptations today.